Nicole is the newest 5-star character coming in version 6.6, and she's shaping up to be the overall best Pyro support in the game. And yes, I've seen the numbers and I know the controversy, but I'm also here to shine a light on what the calcs don't show, and give a bit of perspective. In this guide, we'll cover her talents and rotations, best weapons, artifacts, teams and constellations, and explain why comfort can sometimes outperform the calcs, and whether she's the true Bennett replacement we've been waiting for all these years. Hello, welcome to Genshin Filter, your quick guide for everything Genshin. So let's get started! Is your phone running out of storage every time Genshin releases a massive new update? And if you play these big games on PC, you already know mobile can't match the same graphics and often overheats or lags. That's why I've been using StarDesk. StarDesk streams the actual PC version to your phone, so even low-spec phones can enjoy high-end gaming at up to 4K and 144 FPS. And unlike the paid Genshin clouds, StarDesk is completely free. It works on iOS, Android, Windows and Mac. It's 100% safe, and it even supports controllers and full key mapping. Just download StarDesk on both devices, log in, tap connect, and you're ready to play from anywhere. So if you want PC level quality on your phone without wasting storage, check my link in the description or pinned comment and try it now for free. And thank you StarDesk for sponsoring the video. Nicole is a 5-star Pyro Catalyst user who ascends with attack percent and is mainly played as a shielder who also provides a very high attack buff to the whole team, and is also a Hexerei character, meaning she wants to be paired with other Hexerei characters to enable even stronger buffs. Her normal and charged attacks are standard Catalyst hits and are completely irrelevant to her playstyle outside of her overworld passive, which we will cover in a moment. Her elemental skill is the main part of her kit. On cast, she will deal 1 hit of AoE Pyro damage. Then she will create a strong shield that lasts for 20 seconds and scales from her attack, and is especially strong against Pyro damage. This shield has the same scalings as Inepha's shield, which is already very good, while Inepha focuses on other stats other than attack, whereas Nicole wants to focus her whole build on attack, which will result in an even stronger shield than Inepha's. Additionally, Nicole will give the whole team an attack buff of up to 600 attack when she reaches 4000 attack. Giving the 600 attack buff also applies to her. In practice, it only requires you to reach around 3500 attack on her to max her buff. Her Ascension 1 passive will upgrade the elemental skill attack buff only for the active character by an additional 300 attack, for a total of 900, after this character has been on the field for 3 seconds. And when you swap off, this additional buff will reset for the next character until they are on the field for 3 seconds as well. If the active character is a Hexerei character, then the buff will be given immediately without the need to wait. Her Ascension 4 passive gives Nicole this additional 300 attack buff as well, when the active character deals elemental damage. But unfortunately, according to the information we have, it does not count toward the 4000 attack cap to help you reach it more easily. So you still need around 3500 attack. So when it comes to her buffing next to Bennett, just for comparison, Bennett's attack buff can reach around 1200 attack, and it only works on the active character, whereas Nicole's buff would be 900 attack for the active character and herself, as well as 600 for the rest of the team. Seems like a very fair trade to me, just to keep Bennett relevant. And I really believe this 3-second restriction is made specifically so Nicole won't work with a front-loaded carry like Mavuika. So Bennett would still have a niche to shine in, which as much as it's weird, I think does give balance to the game, and doesn't just power creep Bennett out of the meta. Her elemental burst deals 1 hit of AoE Pyro damage, and then every time the active character deals an attack, a projection of Alice will appear and deal an additional coordinated attack as well every 3 seconds, up to 4 hits. These attacks deal the same elemental type as the active character's element, and their damage will scale from up to 180% of this active character's attack. What's really cool is that if the active character is a Hexerei, then the projection will be visually customized to them. This burst will last for 20 seconds and will cost 60 energy. The issue with these coordinated attacks is that it seems these attacks have no type, like normal attack damage or skill damage, which unfortunately won't allow you to buff them. The Hex and Circle passive that is enabled when 2 Hexerei characters are on the team will buff the coordinated attacks of the Hexerei character's projections by 300% of Nicole's attack. So it's only relevant if the active character is an Hexerei character, which does give them a bigger advantage in Nicole's teams. Her overworld passive, when you're out of combat and have been rewarded the Nation Compass, will turn Nicole's charge attacks into an even better compass by calling upon nearby Silly to show you the way to chests and puzzles, which I think is really unique and cool. For talent priorities, you want to focus primarily on her skill, as it raises the amount of her attack buff to the team as well as her shield strength. Then level her burst for higher damage from her coordinated projections, and her normal and charged attacks can be completely ignored. For rotations, you would want to switch to her early in the rotation, thanks to her long uptime, so her attack buff is up when swapping to a character who snapshots. And even though you won't get the full attack buff if they're not an Hexerei character since you need to stay on them for 3 seconds, which is probably hurt your overall damage, you would still get the 600 attack buff, which is definitely something. Her signature weapon, Angelos Heptades, is her best in slot. It gives a very high base attack and 16 attack percent, which she appreciates as her kit really focuses entirely on attack. The effect increases her attack by another 12%. Additionally, when the wielder creates a shield, the active character will receive up to 26% damage increase when the wielder has 2600 attack, which you will want to surpass by a lot anyway because of her talent buff requirements. Also, while the shield is still active, when the on-field character hits an enemy or opens a chest in the overworld, the wielder will restore 14 energy every 16 seconds, which is really nice. Lastly, if there are Hexerei characters in the team that are off-field, they will get up to half of the damage increase buff, meaning they can get up to 13% damage increase, which is very unique and really encourages you to field your team with as many Hexerei characters as possible. But unfortunately, other than maybe Lan Yan, there's not really anyone else who would really appreciate this weapon. When it comes to her alternatives, unfortunately there are not many options, or ones that get even close to how good her signature is. Any of the 5-star attack weapons would be a great stat stick if you happen to pull them from the standard banner, or lose to them on the weapon banner, although none of them give more attack or energy in their effect. When it comes to free-to-play options, the best option would be the event weapon Oathsworn Eye, but not many of us were here in version 2.5 to grab it. And other than that, you can go for the other 4-star attack percent weapons, which don't give anything useful in their effects. So at that point, I would just tell you to go with the old trusty Favonius, which is a fine option to help with the team's energy, even though you won't be building crit on her. There is of course Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, but it can make reaching the 3500 attack on her extremely hard, even though you will compensate for it by giving its crazy attack buff. But in general, it can make rotations awkward as her talent durations are very long. So like I said in the rotation part, I would recommend swapping to her at the start of the rotation and not right before your carry. So yeah, if you can get her signature, it's amazing. If not, and you have one of the 5-star attack weapons or Oathsworn Eye, you're still set, and if not, then just go with Favonius. In version 6.6, we are getting 2 new artifact sets. The first set is Disenchantment in Deep Shadow, which focuses on increasing superconduct reaction damage, which is very exciting as it heavily encourages the return of physical teams to the meta. The second set is Heaven's Gift, and it's Nicole's signature set made for Hexerei support characters, giving 20% energy recharge. If the holder is a Hexerei character, then after using an elemental skill, the whole team will get an elemental damage bonus of the equipping character's element for 20 seconds. Meaning if Nicole has the set, she will give 20% Pyro damage bonus to everyone on the team. Additionally, if the Hexenzirkel resonance is active, when 2 Hexerei characters are on the team, then the buff will instead give 40% elemental damage bonus of the holder, as well as the active character, so 2 elemental damage types at the same time. This set is extremely broken as it gives a similar buff to the Cinder City set, which we know is broken, but this new one is much easier to activate and maintain, so it's even better, and definitely the one you should use on Nicole, and probably every future Hexerei support. But until you manage to get a good Heaven's Gift set, your next best option would be 2-piece attack. Or you can also go for Noblesse if you can get enough attack to max your buff and can burst every rotation. For the main stats on the sands, go with attack or ER. Around 180 ER is a good place to aim for, to burst consistently depending on your team. But I would say only try to aim there if you already reached 3500 attack on her to max her buffs, as her burst coordinated attacks are not as important and strong as her skill buffing. On the Goblet, go with attack, and on the Circlet, go for attack as well, or crit rate if you plan to use her with the Favonius Codex. For substats, like we said, the priority is attack, to reach 3500 to max her buffs. But do notice she may get attack from other teammates or even the Pyro Resonance, so do take that into consideration when building her. Then go for energy, and crit rate can also be good if you run Favonius. Before we cover her best teams and synergies, let's just go over where she doesn't work, which is in hypercarry teams whose DPS front loads most of their damage at the start of the rotation, because of Nicole's 3-second buff restriction. The first and main one that comes to mind is of course Mavuika, who's the second strongest DPS in the game with her new combos, and I would argue that they added this restriction specifically so she won't work with her, which will allow Bennett to keep his place in the meta and have a niche to shine in, which is a good thing. But it also is unfortunate, given that she also doesn't really work with the not cry carries or Skirk, which does mean she's unusable in the current top 5 strongest teams in the game. But this can all change in Snezhnaya, and it's too early to tell. Other than Mavuika, there's also Raiden Shogun, who also has a big front-loaded burst at the start of her rotation, but in general is not that good these days as a carry, and also doesn't really need a shield, and is more used these days as a Hyperbloom trigger. Another carry who front-loads their damage to some degree is Arlecchino, as most of her damage is unleashed at the start of her Bond of Life, and degrades the more she attacks. But even then, I would actually count Nicole as an upgrade for her, thanks to the quality of life she provides, with her shield being extremely valuable since Arlecchino can't be healed, as well as Nicole's long talent duration, and not being restricted to Bennett's circle, which would be amazing in her teams. There is another special case for carries, who appreciate Bennett's C6 Pyro infusion, like Razor, Diluc, and maybe also Gaming, who would still prefer Bennett in their team because of that. Though using Nicole in these teams might still be competitive thanks to the removal of Bennett's circle, especially in Razor's case, where his overload teams tend to push enemies out of the circle. So Nicole's restriction really only affects Mavuika, DPS Raiden, and some infusion carries, which is not that big of a deal, and I'm happy Bennett gets to have a niche. Now when it comes to where she does work, it's pretty much all the other teams where you use Bennett, which are a lot, given how impactful he is for attack scaling carries. And even though in the calcs she might be considered a small upgrade or even a side grade to Bennett, in practice, against a real enemy and not a dummy, the quality of life she provides can and will probably result in more consistent and even better performance for those teams. So to maximize her team building, you want to try following a few guidelines. The most important one is to pair her with another Hexerei character to enable the Hexenzirkel resonance, which enable the new artifact set to buff the team dramatically. The best pairing for her would be Durin, pretty much being the new Bennett Xiangling core, providing a shield, strong off-field Pyro application, a great team attack buff and rest shred, as well as the Pyro and Hexerei resonances to buff all these abilities, and you would usually slot them together on almost all of Nicole's best teams. The next great synergy you will want in her teams is to have the on-fielder be a Hexerei character, which will remove the 3-second buff restriction of her A1 for full attack buff uptime, and give the Hexerei passive buff of 300% of Nicole's attack to her burst projections. The first one is of course Varka, who should be a great improvement both in numbers and in practice thanks to her quality of life, as I find Bennett's circle runs out before I even manage to use Varka's second special skill hit, which does impact the team's damage a fair bit. We are also getting in the same version a new 4-star called Prune, who is the Anemo girl we saw in Dornman Port. She's a Catalyst Hexerei unit, and both her and Nicole seem to raise Varka's damage significantly to finally be considered a meta-strong character. Another Hexerei on-fielder Nicole will work best with is the second 5-star coming in version 6.6, Lohen, who is a cryo-polearm character, whose main playstyle is as an on-field DPS for meld teams, who's also a Hexerei character, and is expected to also be added to the standard banner, which usually ends up being very underwhelming. But from the calcs we have so far, he's looking to be a very strong DPS, especially in meld teams, and even in freeze teams, and the fact that you can get him for free in a couple of months from the standard 5-star selector does raise his value dramatically. And of course, I will make a complete guide on him as well right after this one, so make sure you hit that subscribe button if that's something you want to see. In short, his whole shtick is that he is not a hyper carry, which like their teams to be focused on buffing them as much as possible, like Mavuika and Neuvillette, but rather he likes to be paired with off-field sub-DPS characters, like Durin, to spread the DPS across the team, which I think is a really cool design. And even though Nicole is not a sub-DPS, she does buff the whole team, rather than just the on-fielder, and doesn't interfere with reactions, as well as both being Hexerei characters, which does let them synergize very well together. There are also Venti, Klee, and Razor, who surely will prefer Nicole on the team over Bennett, thanks to the amazing quality of life she provides. Now outside of Hexerei carries, she can still be the best option for your carry over Bennett, and depending on who you'd put in the third slot, you can create a very strong core for the right carry. So let's go over them. Placing Faruzan in the third slot, especially if she's at C6, will be a competitive best-in-slot core for hypercarry Anemo carries, like Varka, Venti, Xiao, and especially Wanderer, who would really appreciate the shield and not being bound to Bennett's circle. Emily is also someone who synergizes very well in this core, making a new best-in-slot burning team for Kinich, and any Pyro DPS that excels in mono Pyro teams like Arlecchino, Klee, and Lenny. You can also use Shilonen and Kazuha with the Pyro carries for competitive results. This core also works amazingly in meld teams for cryo carries like Lohen, Risley, and Ganyu, who'd really appreciate the shield and better uptime. For Geo teams, even though they just got a massive buff from Lunar Crystallize, using characters like Shilonen, Albedo or Chiori in the third slot does create a new core that can even compete with Lunar Crystallize for carries like Navia and Noelle. If you use Chevreuse in the third slot, especially if she's at C6, you can make a new upgraded or at least competitive overload team for any Electro DPS like Varesa, Clorent, Sino and Razor, who all appreciate not being locked to Bennett's circle, but might need to build more energy to burst every rotation. For Pyro carries, this core is a bit problematic in Overload since there's no room for an Electro, and also in melt teams, as Durin will interfere with the reaction. Or what if you just happen to not have Durin? In that case, you can also use other Hexerei characters of course, like Fischl in an Overload team for carries like Arlecchino, Klee, Lenny and Yoimiya. Or use Sucrose and Citlali for the melt teams, or Mona and another Hydro applier like Yelan or Xingqiu for the same Pyro carries like Arlecchino, Hutao, Klee or Yoimiya, who all extremely appreciate the shield instead of a healer. You can of course also use Nicole and Bennett together for an insane amount of attack buff, which at that point might be hitting diminishing returns. And even if you don't have room for a second Hexerei character, just remember that the Hexerei resonance is only really relevant to activate the new artifact set on her, which is impactful, but the set would still give half of the team buff. So even without the Hexerei resonance, she would still provide the shield and her full attack buff, making her kit strong enough that she would still be an amazing slot for that team, even without another Hexerei character. Now let's quickly break down her constellations to see if they are worth investing in compared to her signature. C1 deals another coordinated projection attack like the burst does when the active character hits an enemy every 6 seconds, and it scales from 600% of the active character's attack, so it's 3 times stronger, but not that impressive, as like the weaker ones you can't really buff it. C2 is much more impactful, increasing the attack buff she gives the team by another 300 attack, for a total of 900 attack buff to the team and 1200 to the on-fielder and herself, which puts her at around the same amount of buffing to the on-fielder as Bennett. Additionally, when her A4 is active, it will also give 25% rest shred of the active character's element to opponents, and it will also give her shield to your co-op active character, which overall makes it an incredible constellation. C3 gives extra skill levels, which is nice as it strengthens her shield and raises her attack buff by around 100 more attack. C4 gives 8 stacks to the active character when Nicole's A1 is active, which buffed their talent damage by 70% of Nicole's attack for 20 seconds. C5 raises her burst levels, which just gives a bit more damage to the coordinated projection attacks. And C6 gives the whole team her full attack buff and removes the 3-second restriction, as well as lets the active character ignore 40% of the opponent's defense. As I said, she's already an amazing unit at C0, but if you want to invest, her C1 is not looking that impactful, as it focuses on the weaker part of her kit, whereas her weapon is actually extremely good on her and is far above the alternatives, so I would recommend going for it. But if you're willing to go all the way to her C2 and have one of the better alternatives to her weapon, then it is a much better pool. For years, one of the biggest trade-off in Genshin team building was choosing between Bennett's insane buffing and Zhongli amazing comfort. On paper, Bennett usually came out ahead, but in actual gameplay, Zhongli often ended up feeling much better because of how much consistency, safety and freedom he gave you, which resulted in very competitive performance that sometimes even surpassed Bennett's team's output. And so a lot of players, especially the more casual ones, were completely happy to maybe lose that extra potential damage just to get that amazing comfort. And honestly, Nicole feels like the middle ground we all wished we had. And what would happen if you combine Zhongli and Bennett into one character? She gives a massive attack buff, amazing uptime, a very strong shield, and the level of comfort that can absolutely turn into better real performance in practice, not just on paper. That alone already makes her feel incredible. But what makes me even more excited is her future potential. Depending on where the meta shifts in Snezhnaya, I genuinely believe that Nicole has a very high chance of becoming one of the best supports in the game, if not the best, given how impactful Bennett was to the meta all these years. And if you play attack scaling characters, I would honestly recommend picking her up, as she does appear to be the real Bennett replacement we've all been waiting for. And that's a wrap. If this video helped you in any way, consider giving it a like and subscribe for more filter guides. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!
Physics